In the heart of history, in the shadowed halls of power and beneath the flickering torchlight of a restless night, a singular figure stood accused. Surrounded by voices raised in anger, by the weight of falsehoods and the sting of mockery, he did not answer. He did not plead. He did not protest. In a world that demands explanation, that clamors for justification, Jesus, known as the Savior, remained silent. This was not a silence born of weakness. It was not the silence of fear, nor the helpless quiet of someone overpowered by injustice. Instead, it was the silence of strength, of purpose, of a love deeper than words. He understood something profound, that truth does not need to shout to be real. It stands, unshaken, even in the hush of accusation. It endures, even when every voice around it is raised in opposition. Imagine that night. The high priests, robed in authority, their faces stern and voices sharp, hurled questions and charges. Pilate, the Roman governor, a man accustomed to power, looked for answers, for a defense, for anything to relieve him of the burden of judgment. The crowd, restless and swayed by the winds of the moment, cried out for blood. Yet through it all, Jesus gave no defense. He offered no rebuttal. He stood silent, and in that silence the world trembled. His silence was not empty. It was full of meaning, full of purpose, full of love. It was the silence of the Lamb led to slaughter, fulfilling ancient prophecy, embracing a destiny written before the foundations of the world. He opened not his mouth, not because he could not, but because he chose not to. His was the silence of surrender, not to evil, but to the will of God, to the plan of redemption that would change the course of humanity. That silence, paradoxically, was the bravest act ever witnessed. For in a world that equates noise with power and words with strength, to remain silent in the face of injustice is to embody a courage that defies understanding. This was not resignation. It was resolve. It was a love so fierce, so determined, that it would endure humiliation, pain, and even death for the sake of those who stood against him. His silence spoke volumes. It spoke of a love willing to suffer, to bear the weight of sin, to absorb the venom of hatred and transform it into forgiveness. It was a silence that echoed through the ages, a silence that reverberates in every heart that has ever felt misunderstood, accused, or alone. In that silence, Jesus identified with the suffering of the world, with all who have been wrongly judged, with all who have endured pain in the shadows. But his silence was not the end. It was the beginning. For in refusing to defend himself, he became the defense for all. In accepting the sentence of death, he offered life to all who would believe. In his quiet surrender, he thundered forth redemption, breaking the chains of sin and opening the way to reconciliation with God. At Faith and Glory, we look beyond the surface of this story. We reflect on the greatness of Christ's choice, to be silent before sin, yet thunderous in redemption. We see in his silence a model for our own lives, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful testimony is not in what we say, but in how we endure, how we love, how we trust the purposes of God even when the world misunderstands us. There are moments in every life when words fail, times when explanations fall short, when defenses seem futile. In those moments, we remember the sacred silence of Jesus. We remember that truth stands even when unspoken, that love endures even when unacknowledged, that God is at work even in the quiet. His silence invites us to trust, to believe that we do not always have to have the last word, that sometimes faith is found not in the noise but in the stillness, not in the argument but in the surrender. It calls us to a deeper confidence, not in ourselves but in the God who sees, who knows, who judges justly. And yet his silence was not the absence of power. It was the fullness of divine will. In that quiet, God's plan unfolded. In that hush, the seeds of salvation were sown. The cross was not the defeat of Christ, but his victory. His refusal to defend himself was not the loss of his cause, but the triumph of love over hate, of mercy over judgment. So if you feel the weight and beauty of that sacred silence, if you have ever stood in the quiet, longing for justice, longing for hope, know that you are not alone. The silence of Christ is for you. It is a silence that speaks, that comforts, that redeems. Let us walk in that truth. Let us remember that sometimes the most powerful witness is not in the words we speak, but in the lives we live, in our willingness to trust, to endure, to love without condition, in our refusal to let the noise of the world drown out the quiet voice of God. At Faith and Glory, we are committed to telling these stories, stories of wordless faith, of silent courage, of quiet redemption, stories that speak with eternal power, that remind us of the greatness of Christ's love and the strength found in surrender. If this message resonates with you, if you find hope in the silence and strength in the story, join us. Let us continue to reflect on the wonder of Christ's choice, to celebrate the beauty of his love, and to share the power of his wordless faith with a world in need of hope. For in the end, it is not always the loudest voice that changes the world. Sometimes it is the quietest. Sometimes it is the silence of a Savior standing before the world, loving it to the very end.
Thank you for watching this video. If you found the content meaningful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Faith and Glory channel so you won't miss out on more inspiring videos about faith and life values. See you in the next video!